So welcome everyone to day 2 of your erotic revolution, a love story. We're going on a journey together. We're going on an initiation of sorts into your erotic freedom, which is what you have deserved all along. And you're doing an amazing job already by being here. So right off the bat, I welcome you, I celebrate you, and I invite you to be an active participant in this space, whatever that means. If you're here live, commenting, if you're on Facebook, commenting as well, being part of the interaction. And if you're watching on the recording, I would love to hear from you and get to know you. So shoot me a message on social media, shoot me an email, and yeah, tell me what you are getting out of this initiation. So get comfortable, get cozy, get connected with each other, and tell me you are here and blank. Here and what? Today I am here and I'm a little tired. I stayed up a little later than usual last night, didn't get as much sleep, and that is what it is. So tell me here and pop it in the chat. Yesterday we went through some of these. These are some guidelines. So safety, confidentiality, and comfort and nourishment are our top priorities. And we really do go by the principles of infusing love, self-compassion into this entire journey of our sexual liberation. That is one of the key ingredients, if not the most special secret sauce to overcoming vaginismus. And we're on a journey of growth and empowerment and recreating a relationship to play and rest and pleasure that is nourishing and supportive to kicking some vaginismus butt. So know that all of you is welcome. Your only role is to find your truth, to honor it, and to, yeah, keep connected, keep your finger on the pulse of who you are, what you desire, what your body needs, and how you can be a team in that journey to your erotic revolution. So day 2, let's take a moment to enjoy a practice together, right? Yesterday we enjoyed a gentle meditation, and today I'm going to ask you to move to the edges of your comfort zone. So the invitation is to stand up with me, and we are going to do a little bit of a somatic shake. All right, we're going to shake off the past. We spoke about the past yesterday, the past that has kept us a little bit in a stifled shackle, potentially, that feels like a contraction, stress held in the system, and we want to express that through some movement. So I'm going to invite you first to start off by shaking your hand, just the right hand. Shake it quicker, and then start to get the arm involved. All right, so we're letting the body through movement just activate and release some of the cortisol, the adrenaline that it may be storing within its tissues. And now your arm is a little bit wacko, right? It's going all over the place, involving the shoulder. Let that happen. Still isolating to that one arm. And now let the second arm be involved. So both arms through the shoulders, through the elbows, through the wrists. Go ahead and shake it. Let it look odd. Let it look a little weird. Let yourself do what you may not have given yourself permission to do. And now we're going to involve the legs. So whatever that looks like for you, continuing shaking the hands and the arms and the shoulders, but it's starting to involve the legs. Shaking at the knees, shaking at the feet. And then naturally, maybe your chest wants to get involved. And this can get tiring, but hold in there, stay with me. Shaking the legs, shaking the chest, getting the hips involved, shaking that booty. We're going to do just under another minute. And notice which parts of yourself seem a little bit stiff. Maybe it's the neck, inviting some movement in there. Maybe it's the back. Let yourself change up any sort of pattern that you may be in with that shake. So letting the arms go back, letting the chest move. Maybe there's some rippling, wavy sensations that want to come through. 10 more seconds. One final shake. All right, and come back to stillness. Standing on both feet. And notice. Notice the sensations of your body. Notice the blood running through your veins. Feel your heartbeat. Notice the sensations of your breath. And invite yourself into a deeper state of presence. You have nowhere else to be, nothing else to do in this very moment. Imagine there is a bubble around you, and this is the time and space for you. Beautiful. So bringing a little bit of movement to your body, if that feels right, maybe a little stretch. And then coming back to a seat. Well done. Great job with bringing yourself to that edge of your comfort zone. Maybe there's warmth, some fire moving through your body. That is a practice, a body-based practice to release some of what we may have been holding within our musculature, within our tissues, within our fascia. And this is an amazing way to match an emotional activation that we may have been experiencing with the expression of that activated energy through movement, through breath. And we didn't play with this today, but the third principle is sound. These are the three principles of Tantra, and a lot of what gets infused into the body-based practices, the somatic work, and the body-based approach that is part of the holistic approach of overcoming vaginismus, where we're not talking just about the mind and the analytical piece. We are really getting the body in on the rewiring of our ability to rest, to open, to surrender, and to allow for the full spectrum of emotion and the full spectrum of expression. All right, so the overview. We are on day 2. Yesterday we talked about our common past. Today we're speaking about the present. And of course, it's a challenging present. There's no doubt about that. And there are opportunities for us to give ourselves the gift of presence, just like we did in that little exercise. And that's part of what we're going to explore today is what does the present look like and where do we go from here? Tomorrow, we're going to talk about a common beautiful future. So day 2, your personal journey, some old keys, and then we're diving into common mistakes. So I don't believe in mistakes. They are mistakes, quote unquote mistakes, because I do trust that every single experience of our lives has a purpose and provides some value in some way. But the common mistakes we're going to cover today, the gaps, you could say, in potentially your path, just like they were in my path, have to do with feeling like you're right back at square one, a dilating discipline danger, overwhelmed, alone, and out of touch. And then we're going to speak about filling those gaps and then touching on insights, questions, and celebrations, as well as our giveaway. So again, stay till the end to know how to enter our giveaway if this is your first time joining us. Whew. Oh, still catching my breath from that exercise. So, your love story. Yesterday, we spoke about the components of your love story. And today, we're zeroing in on the second last step of the personal journey. And so, I'd love to know, what have you tried in your personal journey so far? If you'll feel called to share, please do so in the comments. Let us know on Facebook or shoot me a message. What have you tried so far in your personal journey? And I am going to guess that it may have involved some of these steps. All right. So, first off, doing nothing. If you, for a while, for some time, did nothing, I want you to know that you are not alone. I swept vaginismus under the rug for a long time, not yet being quite ready to come face to face with this staircase, this path that was ahead of me that felt so overwhelming and heavy. And so perhaps there was a time and a stage where you did nothing. But the fact that you're here and you're watching this makes me assume that there have been a lot of steps that you have been taking and that you've invested time and energy and love into on your sexual liberation journey. So which other ones of these have you tried? Potentially you learned about your anatomy. You got acquainted with your body, which is a beautiful step in the right direction. Maybe you self-pleasured, you explored your relationship to pleasure and to how your body desires to be met in its natural inclination for arousal. As human beings, our clitoris, as women, our clitoris actually has one single purpose, and that is for the experience of pleasure, which is a beautiful way that we were designed, that we exist as nature. So next, maybe you did pelvic floor relaxation exercises. And if so, I'd love to know which ones you did, because this is a big umbrella term, and there are definitely lots of gaps to be filled within the understanding of what pelvic floor relaxation exercises are. We are going to touch on this, but one of the things that I want to throw out there right off the bat is that if you are recommended to do Kegel exercises, you want to be doing reverse Kegel exercises. So not standard Kegels, reverse Kegels. This is one of the biggest physical details that people miss out on and follow recommendations on that aren't quite hitting the mark. We want to be making sure we're learning how to engage with the full range of motion of those pelvic floor muscles for the purpose of relaxing them, for the purpose of softening and releasing the overactive hypertonic, potentially pelvic floor muscles that you are sporting right now. And standard Kegel exercises have the purpose of strengthening rather than learning to relax. So they are more so that bicep curl of tight, 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 strengthen, though tight and strengthen are not the same thing, but in this example, the bicep curling rather than the relaxation piece of that bicep curl. We want to have the full range of motion and ability to be in control through our mind to body connection of those pelvic floor muscles. So what else? You may have confided in a friend. That's a beautiful thing to do. And hopefully you found people in your life that are safe spaces for that and that provide a supportive opportunity for you to get vulnerable and to be held in that vulnerability. Another one that is quite common as a recommendation is that you got Botox. There are quite a few stories on this on the Love Diary blog, if you'd like to check them out, where I have seen very, very few cases where Botox has been valuable and helpful in the long term. So just throwing that out there, that has been my experience. So maybe that's something that you considered or are considering right now. You may have visited your doctor. You may have bought a vibrator. I remember going to a sex store for the first time with my best friend. I wrote about that on the Love Diary blog as well. And it was quite an experience. It is something that I remember being quite connected to then me realizing what my style of wanting to, explore in that way was. I went for Kegel balls, like Kegel exerciser balls, thinking that that is going to be a productive way to walk out of the sex store with a product that is actually for my quote unquote health. And not necessarily even pleasure. I went for the thing that was more productive than pleasurable. It was very interesting. And at that time, I didn't know that these will not be helpful for my vaginismus journey. You may have tried EMDR. You may have gone drunk. I did to try to overcome vaginismus. I definitely did. We may have, in many different ways, tried to numb that experience of pain. And getting drunk or using other substances may have been part of your journey too. And I want you to know that it is a common experience and there's no shame in exploring that. I know that desperate times call for desperate measures sometimes, but I imagine that you too discovered that it did not support you, neither in the moment nor in the long term, though some people do find that they are more apt for relaxation if they are under the influence. But again, we don't want to be reliant on that, right? You may have read all the books. You may have, analyzed the situation, understood a lot of the conceptual pieces of it, the theory behind overcoming vaginismus. That's amazing. You may have changed partners, even. You may have tried to move into new relationships with the hopes that because the partner is different, that your experience of your eroticism will be different, that you're going to be able to open and surrender and relax more. And in some occasions, that does help. It really, the relationship dynamics that we're in and the context of relating that we're in can be super supportive, and can lead to quite significant change. So maybe that is something that you tried, and maybe you realized it wasn't in the partner after all. You may have seen a pelvic floor physical therapist and gotten really beautiful support by a medical professional, hopefully someone who is really aware of the intricacies and the subtleties and the challenges of vaginismus, and ideally who's also experienced it themselves. And so that may have been a beautiful step that you've taken in your journey. You may have gone to a sex therapist. You may have done hypnosis. You may have tried dilating, which is the very first thing that most of us are recommended. And you may have used numbing cream. And again, just like with Botox, I do not recommend numbing cream. We do not want to be numbing and therefore ridding ourselves of the physical sensations of the moment of pain. The fact that we don't feel them physically within our system doesn't mean that they're not having an impact on our body's decision of whether to protect us or not. And the reality is that if we push through pain through the use of numbing cream because we don't feel it, the cycle of pain is going to deepen, and that bracing and tightening and anticipation response, and therefore the experience of pain, is only going to strengthen and get worse, even though we don't quote unquote feel it. So please do stay away from numbing creams. C says, I freaked out that something was uniquely wrong with me, discovered vaginismus and felt relieved, validated, and accepted. My husband could finally understand that I wasn't imagining or just dissatisfied with him. I went to a sex counseling, which had terrible advice about pushing through my pain and discomfort to find what worked for us. Oh man, I'm so sorry that you went through that experience. See, I went to a PT, got connected with Katrin's Vaginismus Sisters, etc. Changed our communications as a couple and still working on it. I'm so proud of you, C. You're doing a beautiful job. Thank you so much for sharing your past experience of the breadcrumbs that you followed and some of the detours that you may have taken. Unfortunately, ones that leave us disappointed, but they nevertheless teach us both the things that did work for us as well as the things that didn't work really do teach us and then nudge us in the right direction. So I'm really proud of you for following the breadcrumb trail. So you have done those things and you have walked up steps, and still the light is at the end of the tunnel, and old keys won't open new doors. So it's really important to be trying new things to open that lock of vaginismus that is hard to budge. And as Albert Einstein said, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So I invite you to consider that there are other things out there that may be really valuable next steps and different strategies and practices and tips and awarenesses that will support you going forward. And they're not going to look like the things you've tried already, simply because those things didn't lead to the full concoction of results that you have been looking for. So we're about to dive into what some of those gaps are, and you deserve to have the complete and clear picture of what overcoming vaginismus looks like, the practical guidance and layers of support from a holistic lens each step of the way. My intention and my goal is to provide exactly that. So identifying the gaps. Let's identify the gaps and fill them using a holistic approach and find a new key for the tricky lock of vaginismus, like I said. In other words, where are your blind spots? And by that, I also mean opportunities for breakthrough, right? Sometimes the pieces that we feel are our gaps really do lead us in the direction of the new path to follow to our breakthrough. So common mistakes. Again, I say mistakes loosely, but what are some common mistakes that you may be making / detours you may be on during the trial and error phase of your erotic revolution? I want you to know that all of us have a trial and error phase. It's a really natural part of this less than pleasurable adventure we're on. And so let's explore some of those categories. Common mistake number one, we're going to talk about 3 big ones today. Common mistake number 1 is feeling like you're right back at square one. Who has felt that? You have tried things, you have gone to the doctor, you have then scheduled a pelvic floor physical therapist appointment, you have researched breathing exercises and maybe even tried reverse Kegels, and then even dilated, gotten to that stage, or maybe you dilated too soon and then you were met with that feeling of being at square one much sooner than you had anticipated. I'd love to know if you felt that and what it felt like. So you says 100% yes. It is such a frustrating experience because we pour time and energy and effort amidst our busy schedules to do the thing, to invest in ourselves. And maybe there's lots of financial resources that also go into that. Unfortunately, accessibility to care and attention and the seriousness of it for women has still a lot of, growth to happen in that realm. And so many of us may really put in a lot of time and effort and then still feel like we're moving backwards. And that is a very real Vaginismus Sisters experience. So no matter what I try, I go right back to square one. And then all of a sudden there's like this blank page, what feels like a blank page, a new beginning that may be filled with a little bit of hope, considering fresh canvases give us an opportunity to then paint on them and try new things. But it still comes with that frustration and disappointment of what hasn't worked before. The response to this has a lot to do with the nervous system. When we move forward with action, it's like we are stretching that elastic band forward. It's like we're wearing an elastic band over our torso, around our torso, and then we're stretching it forward. We're trying to go, and in a moment of stress or fatigue or overwhelm or burnout or emotional instability of some sort, just lots to handle, lots to juggle, we happen to let go of that elastic band and boom, right back where we started, and maybe even further back because of the ricochet. So this feeling of being at square one after putting in the effort most often means that we are dealing with a dysregulated nervous system, that our nervous system is in a state of dysregulation, and we are stuck in one of the survival strategies of fight, flight, freeze, shut down. There's fawn as well. And we're about to speak on a little bit of those strategies, but this is very likely what may be happening if you do over and over again feel like you're right back at square one. The nervous system requires a spaciousness to have new information and new experiences land and be registered as, moving the needle forward. If our nervous system is sort of closed and tight and there is no ability for learning and growth, therefore, anything that we'll do is kind of going to fall on deaf ears. So Peter Levine says trauma is found in the nervous system, not in the story. We touched a little bit on trauma yesterday. There's a full training on nervous system regulation and trauma work inside of Sexually Liberated. I won't be able to spend too much time on it now, but I wanted to move through the 5 trauma responses, the 5 responses that trauma comes back as. And I'd love for you to identify yourself in one of these, 2 of these, 3, 4, or even all of these. You definitely don't need to be one or another. There may be a combination depending on the context. So fight or flight are sympathetic nervous system responses. Parasympathetic would be shut down and fawn. And then there's also functional freeze. And these are what sort of explain the experience of each of these. Again, there's lots of stories that I've shared and pieces we've touched on about each of these. But my question to you is, which one do you see yourself in the most? If you're in fight, you may tend to, in times of overwhelm, when those stress hormones that I spoke to, adrenaline, cortisol, when they're high and they're building up in the system, you may tend to react in a defensive way or an explosive way, or maybe extra irritable. Anger, rage, and frustration are kind of at the forefront of your experience if your go-to trauma response is fight. On the other hand, there may be flight that's more active for you. That means you are keeping yourself busy. You are potentially escaping through that busyness some of the discomfort that is looming in your nervous system, those building up emotions and activated energy within your body. There may be perfectionist tendencies that are at play. You may relate to the word workaholic, and anxiety, panic, fear, and worry may be part of your experiences. If you can see yourself in these 2 so far, let me know, and you can comment on which ones feel more like you. The next one is shutdown. So now we're getting into the more parasympathetic expressions of trauma. And shutdown, you may feel spacey, exhausted. Numbness might be more so your go-to. There may be a sense of isolation, and the word lazy is there because you may have been called lazy in the past if your body and your nervous system have tended to go to that expression of trauma. So helplessness, hopelessness, shame is a big one of an experience of shutdown, and depression may also be part of your ups and downs. C says, I think I'm prone to flight, but for vaginismus, when I can't ignore it, flight, I will either fight or shut down depending on my energy level. Yeah, beautifully said. So flight is this act of ignoring. And sometimes when we have something right in front of us that we do not and cannot be busy enough to not see, we can actually tend to go for some of the other ones. And for you, that seems to be fight or shut down. Thank you for sharing, C, and great self-awareness there with identifying that. The other parasympathetic one is fawn. So here we're talking about people-pleasing tendencies, being agreeable, wanting to make sure everyone else is okay, and in the meantime, masking your own reality in order to please. Being agreeable and having no boundaries. I definitely have seen myself in that, and I have that trauma response still alive in certain contexts. My other big one was flight, and that workaholic piece, that always needing to be on the move, pushing through, go, 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 achieving for the purpose of proving myself and my value. Those are parts of my expression of flight that I can relate to. And then fawn being another big one. Functional freeze, lastly, is more of a emotional numbness. you seem calm and collected. You're kind of muscling through life, but you have this big protective barrier. And it's an autopilot kind of mode. Dissociation is at the forefront with this one, and there is a turmoil that's happening within your system, but there is a bit of that numbness of actual expression. So the people in your life will not be able to tell, in fact, that there's so much movement and even chaos within your system. So tell me which ones you can relate to here. Let me know. I'd love to know if this is something that's more new to you or if you've already explored some of these trauma responses. And it's really important to consider the three nervous system states as well, with filling the gap on this piece of getting that elastic band pulling you backwards all the time because you are in survival mode. So the polyvagal theory splits up these three states into ventral vagal, which is a parasympathetic state. And on the other side of the ladder at the bottom, we've got the dorsal vagal, which is also a parasympathetic response, but this is more of the shutdown and disconnection. Whereas the green part of the ladder is the connected state, where you feel rested and social and present and creative and hopeful, and you feel good. This is a sense of safety. And this is where we want to bring our nervous system into first before we do any of the other components of what overcoming vaginismus requires of us. So if we confide in a friend, but we are stuck in fight or flight, or we are in shutdown, well, that effort of confiding in that friend is not really going to land on a nervous system that is open for receiving the support and the compassion and the empathy and maybe even the good advice that our friend gives us if we're looking for advice. So we want to be bringing ourselves in the green. The yellow area is the sympathetic nervous system. The adrenaline and cortisol overwhelm the system here. There's intense mobilization. And oftentimes this is a protection mode. So you're mobilized, you've got increased heart rate, you feel angry, afraid, perhaps anxious, irritable, and essentially your nervous system and your body are going through an experience of danger. So you're no longer in safety in the green, you are now in danger. And again, the red one is now not just danger, but life threat. And when your body is in the context of feeling threatened for its life in its ultimate survival mode, then we've got that full shutdown, the full numbness. There's a slowdown of the organism happening, a decreased body function, dissociation, and essentially that mobilization that the adrenaline and cortisol had created in fight or flight has been so intense that the body is actually shutting down in response to it. When we shook a little bit earlier today, we had actually matched the energy of mobilization within our system. If we were in fight or flight in that moment, we're matching that energy with the expression, and we are expelling, therefore, we are allowing for that movement within ourselves to be expressed with physical movement, therefore releasing and expelling that cortisol and adrenaline. So a shake like that is a really great practice to ground ourselves, to come back into presence, and to activate the parasympathetic nervous system and access a state of safety. That's just one little strategy. And of course, there's so many others that I'll also tell you about in just a moment. The stress response cycle is also a nice one to consider when thinking about the nervous system. This is essentially what we just talked about, but here I want to note that animals in the wild experience this kind of stress cycle, and they're routinely faced with threat. If you imagine an animal being attacked, right, a little deer being attacked by a lion, for example, what they do in nature is after the threat has gone on its way, has left, and all of a sudden, right, they're no longer in that life danger, life threat. They're no longer in that danger context. They are now safe. They are, in fact, going to lay down automatically, start shaking. And this is not a conscious shake like we just did it, but it's a neurogenic muscle tremor It's a tremor that the body does all by itself as a natural mechanism of expelling that adrenaline and cortisol and the stress hormones that would otherwise be stored and held in the musculature, in the tissue, in the fascia of that animal. They have this automatic mechanism for self-cleaning. It's like a self-cleaning function. And when those 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 7 minutes of tremoring are complete, that little deer is gonna hop up on its feet. It's gonna shake its tail off, not because it has to for the purpose of, releasing that, but just out of a little reset it does on a conscious level. And then it's gonna go on its way, now completely free of the moment of danger that had just happened. Us humans, unfortunately, we have suppressed those animal instincts of resetting. We have them. We have them in our sexually liberated program we just went through last month, a tension and trauma releasing exercises session in which we activated this neurogenic muscle tremoring response in order to relearn and surrender to the wisdom of our body that knows how to reset our nervous system. And this practice is one that I swear by to create, to add as a habit. It doesn't have to be a lifelong habit, but of course, it supports us in dealing with the stressors of everyday life that we otherwise just kind of collect and push down and suppress and carry with us. So these neurogenic muscle tremors are incredibly important for overcoming vaginismus, and I invite you into looking into them or joining us so that you can be part of this practice. Like I said, the conscious brain really gets in the way with humans to otherwise allow that somatic experience of the body to be complete, and we suppress. So next up, I'm curious about your current relationship to allowing yourself to be with the sensations and emotions that are in your life, right? We just talked about the trauma responses and how some of those are escapist patterns away from those things, those sensations, emotions. How is it that your relationship is currently to that? To be giving yourself the gift in the present moment to feel without sending your body and your nervous system into overwhelm, and to therefore experience, express, and expel that stress from your system. Have you had breakthroughs in that? Has that been something that you haven't really considered and maybe looked into and explored for yourself? Do let me know where you're at with that. I want you to know that in my life, that experience of anger within my family unit was something that made me quite scared of feeling. When my parents would fight a lot and I would see these explosive expressions of anger and rage and, that's how I would be able to label them most clearly. Their own emotional dysregulation had me feel a lot of fear about emotional expression in itself. And here's the kicker. When I discovered that I too had anger within myself, within my body, within my system, and I realized that there was a parallel between the quote unquote monster out there that I was witnessing and a similar energy that lived within me, I decided that that is never going to come out. It is going to be hidden. It's going to be pushed down because I did not want to turn into the very same source of chaos and fear and, aggression. So that was a moment when I subconsciously decided that my anger is not welcome, that I cannot be with the intensity of that because one, it's not okay in our world to be that way. And two, likely because I also thought I couldn't handle it. And I required to move through the work of understanding those parts of me, welcoming them to center stage, allowing them to be expressed and to share the message that they had. And quite often, anger has the message of what we're not willing to tolerate, what we are a no to. Anger also, as I shared yesterday in my story of my revolution, can also be a real beautiful source of power. And so there's lots of value in interacting with that part of us. And hence, I invite you into considering for yourself what specific emotions feel the most difficult to touch that exist for every single human being on this planet. They are not innately bad or wrong, right? But be curious. What feels a little bit out of reach for you? Is it sadness? Is it grief? Is it frustration? Uh, is it anger? For a lot of us, it is anger. So if you can identify that and you want to share with us in the comments, please go ahead. Filling the gaps for this quote unquote mistake is really the how of how to regulate the nervous system. So I already told you about the neurogenic muscle tremoring through tension and trauma releasing exercises. If you want to explore that, go ahead and Google it. If you want to be looking for a TRE provider, I myself am one. You're welcome to work with someone else who feels right, a provider who is going to be able to guide you in activating that response within your system so as to learn the skill of being able to regulate your nervous system, be in control of your own experience of regulation. And yeah, the other thing, what was the other thing I wanted to say about that? TRE is a big deal. And if we don't pay attention to nervous system regulation through any of these practices, again, it's that visual of the elastic band sending us right back to square one because we're still in that survival strategy in the yellow or the red. We want to be in the green before layering anything else on. That's why we're starting with this common mistake. So shaking, neurogenic muscle tremoring, meditation, and other mindfulness practices could be really good for this. Breath work, we want to be working with breath work that is not necessarily activating. We want to be activating the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest state. So a nice principle to remember with that when it comes to breath work is that our inhale is going to be a certain length, and we want our exhale to be longer than our inhale. That way, we are regulating. We're also toning. We are creating vagal tone. We are helping the vagus nerve be toned and essentially working for us instead of working against us into sending us into survival strategy. Another thing is connecting with nature, body awareness in general, being connected, that mind to body connection, being aware of where you're holding tension at any given moment in life. Of course, we're not always going to be aware of where we're clenching. Like I was clenching my butt cheeks all the time, for example, my shoulders were up. We're not always going to be aware of those responses, but creating a relationship with our body so as to be able to, at our cue, get in touch with that and then notice the reality of our physical experience is going to be really helpful for overcoming vaginismus. And overall, the practice of slowing down helps to regulate the nervous system as well. The goal is to widen your capacity to safely feel, so you can be with the sensations, feelings, emotions, and impulses without the overwhelm. When we do widen our capacity to feel, we are powerful. And by powerful, I mean that we have an ability to lead ourselves through difficult times, to be with the sensation of discomfort, right? I'm not talking about tolerating physical pain, but in life, we go through moments of discomfort. Maybe we feel someone else's discomfort as well. And we are asked to rise into being able to hold the energy of peace, of calm, to be regulated amidst the chaos that may be happening around us. This is the number one skill of your erotic revolution, is to, in situations where you could be sent out of balance, to retain that groundedness. It's huge. It's energetic capacity to be okay no matter what. And of course, you're going to go through the experience and expression of intense emotion, but doing so in a healthy way that doesn't send you into overwhelm is the goal. I want to note that in section 1 of Sexually Liberated, we dedicate all of the topics and practices and conversation in there to a nervous system reset. And that involves a couple of chapters, the mind to body connection yoga chapter and releasing deep muscular tension. But of course, throughout the experience, there's other invitations that also do address the nervous system reset work. So I'll share a little bit about that as we go. The next section that is relevant to this particular common mistake is the compassionate emotional processing. Through some of the practices in there, I already mentioned the Tibetan cleaning, for example, that I did, which had my memory of my grandpa saying, don't touch that, pop into my awareness, and then give me the opportunity to work with some of the suppressed shame that I had been storing in my system. Practices like this could also be really supportive to a nervous system reset. And one chapter in there is transforming the pain of the past and dictating your new sexual reality on a fresh slate. Within each chapter, there are multiple topics that dive into deeper layers of these. So, common mistake number 2, dilating discipline danger. I wanted to include this one because dilating is something that most of us are acquainted with, or at least we've been told about. And because it's the first thing we do get recommended, and because we're quite disciplined beings, many of us, really go at with the steps that we're given in order to make progress with overcoming vaginismus. And if we're told dilating, well, we're going to be dilating. Even if we had set the dilators aside in the closet to gather dust for a little bit, I imagine that there is a part of you that, has really been in action around this practice. And there is a danger in being disciplined and having dilators on our hands. So this mistake is I'm dilating, but I see no progress. Have you felt that? You started to engage with these silicone tools, and hopefully they weren't plastic like mine were. There is a story on the Love Diary around how my parents actually got me my dilators. It's an interesting one. Go read it. It's quite out of the ordinary for me to have even shared with them and for them to have been involved, at least in that stage of the journey. And I'm really grateful for them being so proactive in that. And for me, having felt safe at that time to share with them. But yeah, those dilators were not the answer. So overall, dilating being, part of the challenge, but let's see exactly how. So we're going to break down what these mistakes are with some of the don'ts around dilating. So please don't start too soon. Please don't start too soon. And maybe you already have, but may this be your permission slip that if you feel that the dilators haven't been doing much for you, please consider this your permission slip to set them aside. Okay, give yourself a break from them, and hopefully that serves as a sigh of relief. Starting dilating right off the bat is like trying to overcome a snake phobia by throwing yourself in a pit of snakes. We are given the very same thing that has caused us pain, that is the thing that we cannot put inside of our body, and we're told to put it inside of our body in order to overcome our problem. And yes, at the end of the day, working up to a penetrative practice that comes with a sense of surrender and openness and softness and curiosity and pleasure and arousal and enjoyment is the goal. It can involve dilators. It doesn't have to. The penetrative practice is part of the process at some point, but it has to come at the very end. It has to serve as that checkbox list, showing us physical evidence that all of the work that we have already done, moving up to that point, working up to that point, has actually been effective. And we get to check mark to say, okay, my nervous system regulation must be working. All right, I must have awareness and control of my pelvic floor muscles in order to be seeing success with this thing now, right? We have to have spent time on all the things of the iceberg underneath the surface in order to see then the progress when it comes to a penetrative practice. And that requires creation of safety. You must create safety in order for genuine curiosity to start to bubble up. I tell all fellow Vaginismus sisters that I support, when it comes to dilating, and I have step-by-step video guidance in that chapter of Sexually Liberated, but we want to have our body be expressing its curiosity about penetration rather than us pushing through the vaginal opening, wanting to pry and prod it to accept penetration. We are not wanting to go that route. We want to really have her invite something inside of herself through the curiosity that starts to come alive when safety is in place. So starting too soon is a big no-no. And here's another no-no: tolerating pain. I gritted my teeth through pain, and I imagine that you did as well. Let me know if that's the case for you. What did that look like for you? A part of what it looked like for me was just pushing through with my dilating practice, trying to tell myself as I was feeling that burning, stabbing sensation with even just the little tip of the dilator being past my vaginal opening, I just kept telling myself, this is what I was told to do. This is going to help me. If I just keep going, it's going to help me. Like, I must trust, I must believe. This is what the doctor said. And at the end of the day, I was exporting, I was, what's it called? Delegating my trust in someone else rather than listening to the cues that my body was giving me, the sensations, the messages of my body. And my body was saying, no, I do not want this. But I gave it to her anyways because I thought that's, through tough love, that's what she needed to bear in order to be on the other side. But pushing through pain only deepens the cycle of pain. The body, therefore, then has more reason to want to be in protection mode. So every single time that we push through pain, we are deepening. We're moving down that slippery slope. So you must slowly but surely remove expectations of pain by not experiencing pain. Okay? And that will help deactivate the knee-jerk reaction of the body to want to tighten and close. If you haven't seen the cycle of pain before, take a minute here just to notice, right, how it moves. We anticipate pain. That's not necessarily the start of the cycle. Our start may have been the true, experience of pain, which then leads to the anticipation. And then there's an involuntary reaction, the experience of painful sex, the pain reinforces, there's additional bracing because of that, and then the avoidance, and it just keeps moving. There's a resource that I've created to support you in turning the cycle of pain into the cycle of confidence. Right off the bat, just to ignite that spark of hope and confidence to pull yourself out of the cycle of pain and then enter the virtuous cycle of confidence. And if you haven't had your hands on that, if you haven't checked that out yet, feel free to message me and I'll send it over. On social media, you can message me Katrin's recipe, and then I'll know to send that to you. The next big don't with dilating is don't dilate on a schedule. And C says, I can really relate to that. Trusting experts over trusting what I was hearing from my body. And she put experts in quotation marks. It's sad that we aren't encouraged to listen to our own selves from professionals. Yeah, it's really sad. One of the pieces around medical professionals that I've just come to based on my experience is that one of the hardest things for us to say, for them to say, but also for us to say in general as human beings are 3 words. And those words are, I don't know. And because medical professionals in the position that they're in, they kind of have to, or feel that they have to uphold this standard of being an expert, of knowing the answer to our question, though there's never one answer, by the way. It's always the responses within your body that guide you to your truth. But in order to uphold that image, they've got to come up with something, right? Pull something up and tell us that this is the way to go. And that is one of the big ego trips of our society, is this difficulty of admitting that you don't know something. So when it comes to coming back to our sense of truth and power, one of the big reclamations of that we can make is to actually start to get comfortable with those three words. I don't know. Of course, this has to do with things we aren't acquainted with or aren't aware of, that are more so conceptual or just not part of our expertise. I'm not talking about I don't know when it comes to the body's intuition. We can come to a place to say, I don't know what my body is telling me right now, but I'm going to get curious about that. I'm going to approach that with curiosity instead of judgment, and start to be in conversation with the body through understanding how it communicates. And the body communicates through physical sensations. Your yoni, your vulva, your vagina is going to, and it has been, but maybe she's given up a little bit because you have not had the chance to listen as closely, but she had been communicating through physical sensations her yes and her no. And when we don't listen to that and we don't honor that, well, she gets tired of trying to communicate with us, so she takes a step back. And maybe she's fatigued and feels hopeless about us hearing her. But when we start to get curious and she realizes that we're listening, she is going to emphasize those methods of communication, send through those sensations. And when we hear them, we are going to restore that mind to body connection. And then we're going to have clarity on what is a yes and what is a no. How we feel when our body is saying yes versus when she's saying, hell no, I don't want that. And when we start to listen and act according to her cues, that's when everything changes, because she decides that I don't have to hold the responsibility of my no anymore. Katrin's got it. She's doing it with the voice rather than relying on me to be that no for her. And when we take back that responsibility, she has the opportunity to actually sit back and relax and say, oh, that was heavy. That was a lot. I have to do that for a lot of years. But now she's got us, and I have the space for my authentic yeses to come alive. Boom. One of the core principles of overcoming vaginismus is for those authentic yeses to come alive. That's how the curiosity starts to pop up. Thank you for sharing that, C. I want to touch on this dilating on a schedule. And this is truly a sure path to disappointing yourself and feeling like you failed, because desire doesn't have a schedule. When we try to go by a schedule, like if you were told to dilate consistently every day, which is wild to me, or even 3 times a week, and there is a routine, systematic approach that you have to follow, when the body naturally just doesn't follow that systematic way of being, because we are cyclical beings, we're not systematic at all as women, as feminine beings. When we do not meet that schedule, automatically we'll feel like I didn't do it right. I failed. I fell off the wagon. I am no good. And that experience of failure is really discouraging. We want to create a desire-led dilating practice through honoring the body's cues and listening to when the desire is alive and online, and follow the desire schedule, which is going to be more spontaneous than the systematic approach. And just because I just used the word spontaneous, I also want to know that there's note that there's two different types of desire. There's spontaneous desire and responsive desire. It's really important for you to know which one you are and which one your partner is as well if you are in a relationship. But that's a whole other, tangent and conversation. So we want to be leaning into cyclical living and honoring a woman's cyclical nature. There is a time period, probably about a week and a half in your month, that you're going to have very low desire. And if you feel like you have to meet the tick box schedule of dilating during that time because you're supposed to dilate 3 times a week every week, then you're really shooting yourself in the foot and you're only learning that your body is not on your team, that your body is not cooperating with you, when in fact, you're not cooperating with your body. And I did it too for a very long time. This next piece here is don't dishonor your body's no. And this is what we just spoke about. So just as a summary, every time her no is not considered, she feels like she has to yell it louder. She needs to send the message through in any way she can. And therefore, she tightens further. She braces further to say, no, you're not hearing me. I'm saying no. And when we take back that responsibility, then she feels like you are her protector again. And she doesn't have to be the one to be doing the protecting. And when we cultivate that protective energy of ourselves, and that also opens up the conversation of creating union within ourselves of our masculine and feminine energetics. We all have both of those energies alive within us. We can cultivate that healthy masculine protector that is also in action of the protection through our voice and through our action in order to create the container and the space for our feminine to come to life. A desire-led existence to be held through the structure of our consent, really, our yeses and nos, and that container. A quick little story comes to mind here is the experiments that they ran in schools with kids and their playing habits during recess time. When there was no fence around the backyard of a school, there was no containment of the area of play, what you would see kids do is that they'd all be kind of huddled up into little groups close to the school and playing in that way, right? That was their safe bubble. But as soon as they put a fence, a container, rules of the game, so to speak, around the school, then those kids were freely exploring all corners of that yard because they felt held, they felt protected, they felt like they knew where things start and end, and therefore what the opportunities for play were. And that's a huge, nice little visual to keep in mind, that we've got to create that container for ourselves in which we can then cultivate safety. And that container is the masculine, whereas the actual movement, the flow, the expression, and the experiencing within the container is the feminine. And we also did a deep dive on this within Sexually Liberated that I found to be a really interesting and valuable conversation. Also, don't forget about pleasure. We remove pleasure from the experience when it comes to dilating quite often. And we're also told by some medical professionals that this is the better way to go. And I don't agree with that. In a conceptual way, it's kind of wild to me that we would remove pleasure from the very same process that is supposed to lead us to a pleasurable outcome of enjoying intimacy in a pleasurable way. And if your goal is PIV sex, right, to have pleasurable PIV sex, pleasurable penetrative sex of other forms. So why take the pleasure out when we're hoping for the pleasure at the finish line with the big bang at the end? And pleasure truly serves a valuable role in a physiological perspective. It acts as that doorbell to our body to send a message up to the brain and then send the message back down to our genitals to actually prepare for those guests that are about to be up in there, that are ringing the doorbell to say, hey, we're here, and then are wanting to be let in. And for their experience and for our common experience as the hosts, to be a nice one. We want for the body to be aware that they're coming. And pleasure is that alarm, that doorbell, that nice ding dong of, hey, we're here. That creates blood flow, additional lubrication. It activates the response of tenting in the system, where the vagina literally expands and elongates to up to 8 or 9 inches in order to create that spaciousness for the guests. And that's an incredible way that the body works. The cervix literally moves up and out of the way, moving the back wall of the vagina outwards, creating more space for penetration. And if pleasure was not part of the process, well, the body kind of gets shocked into letting those guests inside of itself. And we do not want that, right? We want a gentle, nice party with an invitation and with a doorbell rather than a barging in to the system. So let me know how that lands for you. And if you've heard this explained this way before, is this new to you? It definitely was new to me. And it's not uncommon that we're not taught these very important things about how our body works in our school systems. But of course, that's also another tangent that we could go on. So, dear body, you were never the problem. I invite you to notice how that feels. And maybe there's a part of you that doesn't quite believe that yet, and that's okay. But potentially there is some release, there's some compassion that's available there when we have that slight conversation with our body to say, you were never the problem. I also wasn't the problem, and you and I are a team, right? We're kind of one. I don't want to separate the body from you or me. We are a team, a unit, but so often we kind of disconnect ourselves from the body and we say, you're the problem. I blame you, right? You're the one that's not cooperating. But in this case, we can see that the body was doing its best to serve us, to protect us. And yeah, that's a nice realization to have. So when it comes to this mistake, filling the gaps is asking the question of how to practice penetration effectively. So practices like, and I'm only listing new ones here, some of the ones we already mentioned are also applicable. Of course, the nervous system reset helps make penetration more effective, penetrative practices, but there's also diaphragmatic breathing, reverse Kegels, myofascial release. And for this, I want to note that we try to create spaciousness within our muscles, right? And if you imagine the muscles being a part of the body's container, on the outside of that container, there's the skin and there's the fascia that is just underneath that creates the holding of everything beneath it. And if you imagine that as like a pantyhose, for example, that you might put over an apple, if we want to expand that apple and create space within the apple, we best be sure that we're first creating space in the container that holds the apple, in that pantyhose. We do not want to be trying to create range of motion in the pelvic floor muscles before addressing the fascia that holds them. And so very importantly, we want to be doing myofascial release in combination with other practices in order to open up that space and have a ripple effect throughout the whole body to create an opportunity for more rest and relaxation and a wider range of motion of our muscles. Another piece is jaw relaxation exercises, hip tension release, stretching, self or partnered massage, yoni gazing, which is also another really healing and beautiful practice to get acquainted with ourselves and connected to our vulva, and of course, self-pleasure. So these are coming from the list of what's included in pelvic floor relaxation exercises, for example. The goal is to prepare the body for opening, to teach your body the skills it needs to release, relax, and then want to open rather than feel forced into it. And a really gentle approach is required with this. So when it comes to the sections inside of Sexually Liberated, this is the relevant one, physical release and relaxation. And within that, there are 2 chapters dedicated to pelvic floor relaxation exercises and pleasant and effective dilating, pleasant as the key word there. And all of what we spoke about are included inside of both of these chapters. So the last mistake we're going to talk about today, common mistake number 3, overwhelmed, alone, and out of touch. This is what I would categorize as more of a relational mistake. And I'm not only referring to a relationship with a partner if you're in a relationship, but the relationship to yourself. And this might sound like I feel alone and it all feels so overwhelming. Let me know if you could relate to that. It all feels so overwhelming. And of course, this is potentially and definitely, but partially connected to the nervous system reset. And the first don't in this category is don't ignore your inner child. In our society, there really is this gradual numbing of the playful parts of us, of the curious, whimsical parts that believe in magic. And that spirit, that playful spirit, tends to get shut down under the weight of the responsibility that comes with adulthood. So with this, you must cultivate a healthy relationship to play again and meet the needs and wants of your inner child. So the needs and the wants. My relationship to play was quite tarnished due to the subconscious programming that I kind of received with my family, with society. I'm curious if you can relate to that conditioning where play kind of started to be at the bottom of the priorities list. And when it comes to overcoming vaginismus, we've got to bring some of that lightheartedness back. We've got to bring the lightness, the fun, the play. And when our relationship to play is more nourished, when we invest more time and effort into enjoying ourselves, enjoying our life, that opens the door to more access to pleasure as well. And of course, more rest and relaxation and more laughter, which of course is quite supportive for overcoming vaginismus. So it's really important to note and to decide for yourself, okay, where can I infuse my life with more play? Another big one is don't block receiving. So we as women are naturally inclined to be givers. We are meant to be nurturers of others and ourselves, but oftentimes we put others first. And therefore we can find it challenging to receive, especially receiving without feeling like we're obligated to give back. Receiving a true gift means there's no strings attached. Otherwise, it's not a gift, is it? We can find it challenging to be taken care of, especially if there's a part of us that doesn't feel deserving of being taken care of. Or on a deeper level, if for some reason we don't feel deserving of good things in general. So there is emotional processing work to be done with the relationship of feeling deserving, feeling open to receiving, and that we are allowed to receive. We're allowed to ask for things that we want. You must restore your willingness to receive for your pleasure and to playfully ask for what you want. And the relational components around overcoming vaginismus, ones with a partner, yes, but also our inner relationship to giving ourselves what we feel that we deserve, giving ourselves time and space to rest, to play, to dance, to anything that comes to mind as a genuine, authentic desire. That relationship of receiving is one to work with and is one of the ways to fill the gap of feeling overwhelmed and alone and like things are too much. When that seems to be the case, and when we don't feel like we have the time to meditate, for example, that is truly when we need to meditate the most and give ourselves that gift of presence. Another big one that this connects to that I kind of just mentioned is don't override your need to rest. We have often fallen, oftentimes by default, into this lifestyle of busyness. Um, I used to wear my busyness as a badge of honor. I remember speaking to my friends, on a daily basis in the corporate life that I mentioned before when I was an accountant. And it was uncommon to ask someone how they're doing and for them not to say, oh, good, I'm busy, just busy. Oh, I'm busy. Or, I'm just too busy. It's this busyness that was a badge of honor. And it almost felt wrong to answer, I'm great. I'm feeling awesome today. Because by default, that was just a bit out of place. So we have to reclaim our our right to feel good, to rest, to honor that need that we have as humans to rejuvenate, to relax and restore. So the depletion of your energy leads to an empty cup. And of course, the giver identity is so interconnected to emptying our cup for the benefit of others. So that entire value system and the threads that connect you to these behaviors, right? Because it's the beliefs that lead to the behaviors. We need to, at a deep level, look at our relationship to rest and notice what has led to it and uh, what to do. There's practices like Psych K, for example, subconscious belief change processes. Of course, hypnosis can be helpful, emotional release through somatic experiences. All of that can help rewire our relationship to rest, and the nervous system work can also help us land sense of safety in rest, because for a lot of us, rest kind of feels like dying, even in the most intense way to put it. It feels not okay, like we're not allowed to. Have you ever sat in a room, let's say on the couch of the living room back when you lived with your parents, for example, or maybe you still live with your parents, and when someone walked into the room, you had the automatic urge to pretend that you were doing something, when just a minute ago, you were just chilling on the couch? I had that experience all the time. Someone walked into the room, oh, I need to look busy. Yeah. And if you have ever been called lazy for resting or being creative or doing something that was not, logically productive, was not a left-brained task, it was more of a right-brained expression of creativity and flow, and you were called lazy for that, well, boom, that could have created the subconscious belief that resting means I'm lazy and being lazy is not okay, so I must not rest. Sometimes it's as simple as that. So in order to fill the gaps, you must set healthy boundaries and get comfortable with creating the space you need for yourself. So getting comfortable saying no. Every single time we say no, we do say yes to something else. And every time we say yes to something that we don't want to be doing, we're actually saying no to something that matters to us, something that matters more. So consider the interconnection between the yes and the no. Both are playing in with each other. Every time we say one, we say the other as well. And you get to notice what is the opportunity cost of each time that you say yes when you really meant to say no. What were you saying no to at the same time? You were probably saying no to yourself. You were probably saying no to your play, your connection with the people that you love. Of course, it's more complicated than that, but that's a nice principle to keep in mind. Next up, don't go against your erotic wiring. What do I mean by that? Here we are starting to be in conversation a little bit about the erotic components, and going against your erotic wiring is similar to going against your romantic wiring around the way that you receive love. So if you went against the way that you receive love from a partner and you were trying to receive it in a different love language than the one that you prefer, the one that actually lands as love for you, well, you would be doing yourself a disservice and you would be at the tail end of it all not feeling loved by your partner. So each nervous system is uniquely wired for pleasure and for safety. Miss Jaya, who's a sexologist, created this system of the erotic blueprints, which I like to refer to as the erotic languages as well. And you must find safety in touch according to your unique erotic language, your current wiring for experiencing pleasure. Just like you need to know your current wiring for experiencing romantic love in order to be able to receive it, communicate that to a partner, and then receive it from them. Or even outside of that, to be able to be aware of it for yourself so you can give it to yourself in the way that you truly receive and feel loved, right? So the love languages are also languages that we must use speaking to our own selves and showing ourselves love. So with this, we truly need to know our erotic language, and there's a quiz that you can do as well within Sexually Liberated. There are games that you can play to identify through the experiences of the body rather than just answering the questions in a quiz and therefore answering with your mind, through the experiences of the body to know what your erotic language is. There's the energetic, there's the sensual, there's the sexual, there's the shapeshifter, and there's the kinky. And those five, or a combination of those, also based on the stage where you're at with your sexuality. Because if you're in a healing stage, one erotic language might be more prominent than another. And then when you move past that stage and you move into more of an adventuring stage, there may be other erotic languages that kind of come into the picture of your erotic language stack. That is a super fun exploration. And one thing we don't do oftentimes with our westernized approach and the medical community's approach to overcoming vaginismus is we don't consider the erotic component. We live in a shame-steeped culture around sex and pleasure, and this is a conversation that you must open with yourself and with your partner if you have one, in order to honor your authentic sexual self in each of your intimate encounters. This is a game changer for fellow Vaginismus sisters. Also, don't ignore your hormonal reality. Once again, we as women, we're cyclical beings. Men are also cyclical beings, but they have a 24-hour cycle, whereas we have a 28-day cycle, quote unquote, about, right? It can go up to about 32, 33. And we can be so hard on ourselves when we don't see linear progress in the same systematic, consistent way that we are sort of expected to or told that we should in our society. And our society is designed for the men's hormonal cycle, which is a daily circadian rhythm. You must be aware of where you are at hormonally in order to understand what your body is most naturally inclined for that particular week of the month, and therefore adjust the way that you approach this journey and the way that you live your life that is actually in line with your body's natural rhythms and signals. So if you're in a relationship, one nice relationship hack is for your partner to also be aware of where you're at. And that could really add a lot of value to your interactions. You can start to see patterns with when is appropriate to have more difficult conversations or make big decisions, when is appropriate to schedule social interactions rather than staying in and enjoying a cozy movie together, for example. There are so many intricacies to consider. And of course, those also include physical exercising and food, nutrition habits, sleep pattern, all of it. So once we start living cyclically, lots can improve also with our well-being. And making progress with vaginismus does require that we do not ignore our hormonal reality. Because we did a training on this already inside of Sexually Liberated, I wanted to show you this piece, the menstrual cycle phases. You're probably aware of them already, but just as a nice refresher, we've got inner spring, the follicular phase, ovulatory, luteal, and menstrual, and each one sort of addresses or it kind of lines up to the seasons. And we go through all 4 seasons in a month. So we've got the yang phases and the yin phases, and it's a game changer to know where we're at any particular time. we had also talked about specific hormones and some of the details around nutrition and physical activity, but just for today, I wanted to scratch the surface on that. So ask yourself, do you know where you're at with your cycle right now? And what signals has your body been giving you to communicate its needs? That is an important thing to keep a finger on the pulse of, is how is your body communicating what it needs, and what are typically the patterns of those needs throughout your menstrual cycle? Let me know. Do you know where you're at? You can drop it in the comments. As you do that, if you'd like to share, I'll also share some partner tips here, just as a nice little thing you can even take a photo of or screenshot, send it to your partner. During each of these phases, these are the most appropriate ways, or these categories of ways, for you to experience intimacy with a partner in a way that is in alignment with where you're at hormonally. And of course, intimacy is not just physical intimacy. There's verbal intimacy, right? Having deep conversations, learning about each other, opening our hearts to each other. And according to each erotic language, our intimacy can look very different anyways. Our preferences are going to be very different anyways. So in follicular, you may want to hit the gym together, but we definitely don't want to be hitting the gym together if you're in your menstrual phase. In ovulation, planning a more spicy date at the edges of your comfort zone would be an appropriate timing. Luteal, those deep conversations and chats, staying cozy, and in menstrual, cooking her favorite meal, where comfort is key. And high magnesium also helps for cramping and any other symptoms you might be experiencing. C says, I think I'm in the luteal phase all the time, lol. And chocolate is always welcome. Nice. Yeah, when we override and we just have a lot going on in our life, we can feel like we're in the luteal phase all the time. And what I have found for myself is that when we start to honor the phases a little bit more in ways that feel right, then there is more of a contrast that gets created between the phases, with our experience of those phases starting to look more different. But when we take the organism into overdrive for too long, they kind of start to melt together into a perpetual state, let's say, of fatigue, as was the case for me as well. So there's lots of opportunity for breakthrough there for you. So filling the gaps, specifically when it comes to this piece, right, of feeling alone and overwhelmed and feeling like there's just too much heaviness to even really hold. Part of the way that we can manage those heavy times are with practices like inner child healing. And again, I'm just mentioning new ones, though previous ones can also be applicable, but intuitive dance. Many of us do dance, and I do dance a lot in general, and even back when I was experiencing vaginismus, I did, but it was less connected to my hip movements. I wasn't really feeling the sensuality of that part of my body because I was disconnected from pretty much everything below the hips. But also intuitive dance is such a great way to be following the cues and the wisdom of how the body feels inspired to move. If you are a dancer, you know how to dance in a more structured, methodical kind of way, which looks incredible, and it is a performance that is amazing. And taking the performative nature out of it and really following our body's intuition and cues in ways that may not look so aesthetically pleasing, but it feels good, that's a beautiful practice for managing some of the heavy times. Menstrual cycle awareness, as we touched on, there is Betty Martin's Wheel of Consent. A whole chapter inside of Sexually Liberated is dedicated to games that have come out of her concept of the Wheel of Consent. And I urge you to look into this or join us and watch all the videos, which also add the thread to connect to the experience of vaginismus. There are erotic languages related practices with the games of touch and other intimacy games with yourself or a partner, adventure date tradition, the sexual communication checklist, which supports us in communicating and even realizing what our sexual preferences are, what our want tos are, what our willing tos are, and what our no ways are. And when we have that clear structure, right, that container of the masculine that gives us a way to systematically speak about these things, it can become a lot easier to actually do that with ourselves and then share our findings with a partner. So, those are some ways of filling the gaps. And again, they all come from our experience sexually liberated. The goal is to let your authentic desires guide you, to play with the full range of the human experience and give yourself permission to feel and be led by your inner compass. So, again, a really big principle with overcoming vaginismus is getting connected to that inner guiding system. And you might say to your intuition and letting it guide you rather than moving through life based on a set of rules and, conditionings and programming. So the sections that are relevant for this particular challenge or mistake are discovering your authentic sexual self, which includes 3 chapters. Chapter 5 of rekindling intimate connection, erotically embodied, which is all about embracing your authentic sexual expression, and then navigating vaginismus in relationships. So the relational component cannot be overlooked. It's a big one. And we've got to feel safe in our relationship to ourselves and the way that we hold ourselves, as well as the union that we create with our partner. So I'm curious, which mistakes have you been making from ones that I've shared? And I just invite you to pinpoint 1 or 2 that you would just like to take away for yourself as, okay, well, these are ones that I can set aside and use as opportunities for trying something different, using a new key to open the old lock of vaginismus as one new strategy or practice. So I'd love to know, which mistakes might you have been making so far? And what's one way you'll course correct if you'd like to share? Again, if you're watching on Facebook, please comment real time as you watch, and I'll come back to your comments and have a conversation with you on some of what you've shared. I really love getting to know you, and I'd love to know what are some of the takeaways from this particular conversation about common mistakes. So, your sexually liberated love story is the holistic manuscript to your vaginismus free life. And it focuses on the 3 pillars that I have come to know are the main supportive principles of overcoming vaginismus, of putting vaginismus in the past, which are compassionate emotional processing, discovering your authentic sexual self, and physical release and relaxation, which are all interconnected with a nervous system reset and the journey of finding safety in surrender, finding safety in relinquishing control and opening according to the wisdom of our body, finding safety in surrender to intimacy, to our desires, and to life as a whole, finding safety in the unknown that life presents us. And some of what I shared, I can hope you can see connects into these 3 pillars and the holistic approach that I'm a big believer of and that Sexually Liberated is based on. There's also an opportunity to go deeper aside from Sexually Liberated, which is our group experience. And I'm going to tell you more about that tomorrow. But just so you know, there's also an opportunity for private mentorship in case you feel that there are ways that you would like to feel more supported with creating those shifts into filling the gaps that you may have identified today. As another spark of hope and confidence that if they could do it, you could do it too, I offer you another handful of testimonials that you can read in more detail on the Love Diary if you would like to. I shared some of these yesterday, and these are new ones um, that you can read on the Love Diary. So without her program, I would not be over vaginismus. I was absolutely over the moon when I realized that I even enjoyed using a dilator. I never ever thought this could be possible. And starting my one-on-one journey with Katrin was one of the best decisions I have ever made. I share these because I am so proud of the women who have walked this path. I'm so proud of you for walking this path. And I just want you to know that it is possible. And here's another three. I finally had pain-free sex. I overcame my vaginismus within a month. And having Katrin by my side to support and guide me has been life-altering. So some of these women, decided to just share their journey as an opportunity for you to see yourself in their stories. So I urge you, pick one of these, head to the Love Diary. You can search it in the search box and just notice the parallels between their stories and yours. So we're coming to a close now. I would love to know what is an insight you're taking away and how you'll put it into practice. C says, I'm trying to course correct with built-in times of rest and self-care. That's amazing, C. Well done. That's a beautiful way to really carve out the time that you deserve, to be intentional with that. And if there's another insight you want to pop in, please do. I would love to know what your questions are. If you have a question now, pop it in the chat. What questions come up for you from today's initiation? Let's continue the conversation. My door is always open. You can message me anywhere. We may have started a conversation, or maybe we haven't started a conversation just yet. Reach out through my website, over email, on social media at Vaginismus Sisters. And I would love to support you in finding your response to that question, the one that feels right to you. Because I always want to point you back to your truth. And during our question and response sessions that happen monthly inside of Sexually Liberated, I emphasize this, and that's why they're called question and response sessions rather than Q&As, is because I don't have the answer for you. I have an answer that worked for me. I have a selection of potential options, and hence I commit to responding in the best possible way that I know how. And if I don't know, I commit to telling you I don't know, and then helping to find the information and the guidance that you're looking for. And underneath all that is to say that there is no one way. There are guiding principles. I'm really all about the principles rather than the strategies and the tips and the tools. I'm about the principles, and then based on those, we create the most appropriate way to your intimacy goals for you. So I only have a response. You hold the answer that is most valuable and relevant to your unique story. And finally, celebrations, right? So this is our tradition. What are you celebrating about yourself? Please let me know your celebrations. What are you celebrating about yourself? And as I mentioned yesterday, this could be a difficult question for us to answer. Today, I want to celebrate the woman who joined us inside Sexually Liberated earlier today. And there is, of course, sort of a welcome email, and then another email with all the details about the program when you join. And I had kind of, I guess, forgotten because not a lot of people respond to that first email, but she responded with a link to a song. And when I clicked it, I realized it's a song. I clued in that email, I ask of you to celebrate yourself for this investment in your sexual freedom that you just made by joining Sexually Liberated. And I actually ask for you to respond to me with which song you are going to dance to in celebration. And so she responded with a beautiful song. And hence, I celebrate her, and I celebrate myself for creating that structure of celebration for all of us, for that gentle reminder that we deserve to take the time to really honor ourselves for where we have gone, where we are, and where we're going. and outside of the doing and the going, to celebrate ourselves for who we are, because it's about the being at the end of the day. We feel oftentimes that it's, you have to have things. And yeah, how does it go? Essentially, we have to be in order to do things, in order to have things. The having is not going to lead to the doing, which is then going to lead to the being. It starts with the being, and it's about that state of experiencing life and coming back to a state of presence and celebration and play and lightness is probably the most high goal that we can have for ourselves in terms of what has us win at life. And so I hope that today was a nice little reminder of that. So please tell me in our conversation going forward, what are you celebrating about yourself? And I want to celebrate with you. The last quote I'll leave you with is, I wonder how many times people give up just before a breakthrough when they are on the very brink of success. And the little visual that comes up with that is that visual of a miner who's just been, going and hustling and drilling and hammering and getting to that end of the tunnel where he hopes or she hopes there's diamonds. And then just before she hits the diamonds, she says, there's no diamonds here. I better turn around and go back. I guess that was a lot of time wasted. But she was so close. She was so close. And I wonder how many people do give up just before that breakthrough. And I trust that you are on the edge of a breakthrough for you. You have been having breakthroughs for you. And that's a huge, huge win. Our giveaway, in case you haven't heard about it just yet, if you're joining us on day 2 as your first experience of this 3-day initiation, it is a mystery. I'm not going to reveal what it is. It is a wonderful gift, though, and the way to enter it is to message me wherever it is with the keyword sexually liberated, and I'm going to know that you've been part of this experience and that you are entering our giveaway. And this is also going to serve as hopefully a welcome invitation for me to send you where you can read more about Sexually Liberated in case you decide for yourself that it is the right next step for you and the final step for you in your journey of overcoming vaginismus and kicking some vaginismus butt. So that's how you can enter the giveaway. Thank you so much for being here, for showing up for yourself. This concludes day 2 of your erotic revolution, a love story. And I very much look forward to seeing you tomorrow for day 3, in which we're going to touch on the future.